YouTube Live. And so I'm just waiting for YouTube to give me the thumbs up, as it typically takes about 30 seconds. But if we are already on a live episode of my YouTube channel, welcome everybody and thank you for joining us. And once again, I'm here with Mitch Gray. And of course, you know me. This is Dr. Keith McNally. And these are conversations with Mitch. And so I do appreciate that because we're here to talk about men's mental health. And of course, you know me, a survivor. And so I'm becoming more and more comfortable saying that I'm a survivor of suicide, my own attempts. Now, typically at this point, I've identified two, but if we push it back all the way to 1996, after I got out of the Marine Corps, it's really five. And so five and counting. And I don't want to count any higher than that. But Mitch, today we're going to talk about energy and intention as part of our recovery or regaining some control over our lives, especially as men, because men really suck at that. Because what I've learned through all my conversations is men typically like to stay superficial and not really go deep into conversation, especially in terms of what their thoughts are, maybe through embarrassment or shame or regret, and definitely are uncomfortable with their emotions. And so, which is just unfortunate. And the more I become more comfortable, the more I become comfortable, I guess if that's a better way of saying it, because I am a doctor, the more I become comfortable talking about it, the more I actually become comfortable talking about it. It's kind of like this cycle of things. The more I
Mhm.
do it, the more I get better at it. Mitch, it's good to see you today. How are you?
Hey, good to see you, Keith. Yeah, you're ready to jump in, aren't you?
I am. I always am. So I'm always,
It's always interesting because you're 2 hours ahead of me. And so you're halfway through your morning. You're almost done with your morning. So you're awake and spry. And I'm always like, man, I'm just getting started. Like I'm just trying to wake up still. So for people watching, they're like, man, Keith's energy. I was watching a video that we did the other day, and I was like, man, Keith's energy is always so good. I'm like, yeah, because it's freaking almost noon where you are. For me, I'm like just starting my morning. So anyway, yeah, I'm excited that you're ready to go. Yeah, and I'm still waking up. Here we go.
okay. Well, let's see if we can wake you up because we're going to talk about energy. And so
Yeah.
I'm going through this healing process, and uh, so I'm doing a deeper dive for myself into three M's. So mindfulness, meditation, and manifestation, right? And so I'm trying to reinvent and redesign my life, this time with intention and energy. Um, because of everything that you've taught me since, our first, early, so we're talking 2021, 2022, our early conversations have now, I've allowed myself to mature. I've given myself permission to take on some new challenges, and I'm doing some self work. And you know me, and so I've talked about some of the things I grew up Catholic and I became Christian, and I've kind of put some of those ideas aside because as I dive deeper into the Bible, the Old Testament, the Torah, um, I'm learning more that it's not necessarily, and so I don't want to really piss people off, but I probably will at some point. Um, Saying that, this really isn't about a story about God. And this all-powerful deity. This is a different narrative altogether. And so what I'm learning is that we're on this planet. Human beings are on this planet, and we're creating the space that we live in, either intentionally or not intentionally. And so I kind of wanted to take a deeper dive onto your perspective about energy, intention, and purpose.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said about how because we're our conversations are focused on the masculine human, the male human for the most part. And the reason you and I decided to focus on that is because number one, that's who we are, not by choice. It's who we are. Number two, um, it was really interesting. I had an interesting conversation at the end of last week with someone, and we were talking about feminine masculine energy and how unfortunately most humans walking the earth don't understand how to tap into both. We carry both energies. We all carry the feminine and the masculine, but we truly don't understand how to step into both. human males tend to be less effective at it than human females. Human females tend to be able to dance in both masculine and feminine. So the question we have to ask is why?
Mm.
And what we know to be true is human males are taught to not dance in the feminine, to not dance with their emotions, to not open up to vulnerability. It was really interesting. Quite a few years ago, I used to run a mental health program for teenagers, and we had thousands of kids come through our program over the years. And one game we used to play, game in air quotes, was a game called Boy in the Box. And I would literally tape off a box on the floor with masking tape, and everyone would stand outside of the box. And then I had about 20 questions that I would ask. And if the question was true for them, they stepped into the box. So they didn't verbally answer, they just physically stepped in the box and then stepped out. And one of the questions, I will never forget this. One of the questions was, were you taught that it's wrong for boys to cry? And out of the hundreds, if not thousands, of teenage boys that I had stand around the box over a 5 to 7 year period, 99.9% of them stepped into the box. That meant yes, that they were taught that it's wrong for boys to cry. Another question was, were you physically disciplined? I'm going to call it abused. So were you spanked, slapped, hit, thumped if you cried?
Mm.
Again, over the years, I mean, this is enough to do a case study. This is how many kids that we asked these questions of. 99% of them stepped into the box. And it was so interesting to then follow up and go, why were you taught that boys aren't supposed to cry? Because only girls cry, would be the answer a lot of time. It's not tough. We're supposed to be tough. Now, these were kids that came from the hardest and the harshest of the harshest environments, who were now sharing what they were being taught as young men, male humans, that it was wrong for them to cry, wrong for them to show emotion. It's not manly. You need to man up. You need to get tougher. That's not how a man acts. It's all of these mythological belief systems that we teach young men. Conversely, young female humans are taught different things. They're taught to be subservient. They're taught to mind their manners. They're taught to keep their mouths shut. They're taught to do all of these things that females are expected to do to be subservient in a society. So now all of a sudden, when females rise to the occasion and rebel and revolt, we call them queen bees in a negative term. I won't say the word because I don't like the word. We call them feminists. We call them, loudmouths or whatever. So we've got this congenial mix of mythological lies that we're teaching both the masculine and the feminine. And the question then becomes, how do we create a new conversation where we're actually teaching humans to dance both in the feminine and in the masculine? The good news is, I think our society, and especially in modern countries, especially in America, I think our societies are built better now for having those open dialogue conversations. And I'm going to say it, thank you to the LGBTQ movement and for them being bold enough and courageous enough to the transgender movement, because they're really pushing to the forefront the conversation that needs to be had about dancing in the feminine and the masculine energies. They're forcing us to have the conversations. And I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful for these revolutions and these movements that come to the forefront of society that make us go, oh, maybe we haven't been doing this quite right. Maybe there is a different way of thinking. And these movements and revolutions are a part, the rebellion is a part of humanity. It's been, last week off the air, you and I were talking about the Garden of Eden, the story and the Torah about, the revolution and the rebellion is a part of the DNA of humanity. It is in all ancient cultures, and we need more rebellions and revolutions because they cause us to have a conversation that's different. So what does that have to do with what we're talking about? The revolution and the rebellion has to come from within. And that really becomes our intention. It becomes, hey, the teaching that you gave me as a child is no longer serving me well. So now I have to step into a new way of thinking and a new way of being. And so you're on point when you say, as male humans, we've been taught something that wasn't quite right. So how are we going to have the courage to have a new conversation wrapped around a new idealism and a new thought process?
Well, how do we bring that energy, masculine, feminine, to an idea that we can be comfortable, regardless of our gender, that we're
Yeah.
comfortable having that balance within us? Now, I'm one that has become very easy through practice to say, I've got a balance of both. I'm not overly one or the other, and I am not gay, in case anybody's wondering. And I'll say, not that anything's wrong with that, as we would quote Seinfeld back in the 90s. Um, but I don't identify as that. So, but I do recognize my ability to become vulnerable, to be able to talk about my emotions more and more, and again through practice. So I recognize that there is definitely a balance of both energies within me, and I'm comfortable with that. So how do we allow, and as you and I are now using this phrase, change the conversation? How do we change that conversation so that we can become more comfortable with it? Is there a strategy that we can use?
I think the idea is giving ourselves permission and giving others permission to actually feel the emotions that are wrapped into this human experience. I actually think feeling your emotions is where it begins because we all have emotions. It's just that some of us were taught that emotions are bad,
Mm,
or some of us were taught that some emotions are bad. For me, I was taught that anger was bad, that you don't show anger, you don't express anger, you don't hold anger, you don't get angry. If you have nothing nice to say, don't say it at all. Kind of those, kind of Southern roots, Christian conservative thoughts.
mm,
I was taught that those things were bad. How did that impact my adult life? I don't know how to deal with anger. I get angry, but I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to communicate anger very well. I think I'm a very good communicator, except when it comes to anger. And why is that? So there's this idea in psychology that you always recall and trigger to your earliest trauma.
mm,
And so what you find when you're dealing with the DID, dissociative identity disorder, or you're dealing with multiple personalities or other things. I'm not a doctor. I've just studied this stuff to the best of my ability. This is my understanding. But what they have found is when you're dealing with these issues, you often recall to your earliest trauma. Well, for many of us, that's childhood trauma. So, in my experience, what I have seen with others around me is they often, when there is a traumatic event taking place, they become that 3 year old again,
mm,
both in behavior, in speech, and in physical action. So you could see a 60-year-old person acting like a 3 year old. Why is that? Because they're facing a traumatic event that recalls back to their earliest trauma. And until the work is done to heal that trauma, you're often going to recall back. So for me, what that looks like is if I'm dealing with a traumatic event, I often recall back to the mythological lies that I was taught as a child. Don't get angry, suppress your anger. Anger isn't good. I wasn't taught that emotions weren't good, especially as a young boy. I was not taught that, but I was taught that certain emotions
mm.
weren't good. Certain shows of affection weren't good or healthy. In fact, they were flat out wrong and, quote, sinful. And so it wasn't just that they weren't good, it was that they would condemn you to hell.
Yeah.
So for me, that's now identified as into my adulthood as well, if I do or don't do something emotionally, if I show my anger, then I will feel the wrath of God. That was my experience in life. If I do A, B, or C, I will feel the wrath of God. That caused me to have a lot of fear, caused me to have a lot of traumatic issues. And that tends to be even all the work I've done. We all still go through things in life, no matter how wise or enlightened we think we become. And we recall and reform back to those moments that the trauma began. So, to your question, how do we actually work through all this stuff? How do we actually start having the conversation of the feminine and the masculine? And it's really just about giving ourselves permission and giving others permission through providing a safe space that they can both experience their trauma, but also experience something new. So, how do we have those conversations? It's just having the conversations. That is the answer. It's having the repetition of the conversation of the moment over and over again. You and I've laughed before, not only on this show that we do, but on other shows that we've done. And that is the universe has this weird way of bringing us back around to the same event over and over again until we get it, until it makes sense, until we can go, oh, now I can level up. That's kind of how trauma works as well. We tend to attract the trauma that we haven't worked through yet. We tend to attract the people that are going to treat us a certain way until we work through getting a different attraction. And so it really is. If I don't know how to deal with my emotions, if I am a male and I'm not sure how to connect with my emotions, the only way through and to that is to put yourself in a position where you're forced to connect with your emotions. Go watch a sad romantic movie. Go do something that's going to cause you to cry. Go do something that's going to cause you to feel anger. Go do something that's going to cause you to attach and experience an emotion that you're not used to. Now, do it in a safe space. Do it in a space with others who care for you and love you and can help you through it. But the only way to it is to go through it and experience it. And that has to be the intention. The intention has to be I'm going to connect with my feminine energy. So I have to figure out ways to do that and de-escalate the masculine energy for many, many men. We need to get rid of some of the testosterone. We need to get rid of some of the mythological lies and the manhoods that we're taught. And we actually need to connect with the feminine because the feminine and the masculine exist within you. They're just energies in the universe that exist. And so until you can connect with those, it's going to be really difficult. The crazy thing is, connecting with both actually empowers your humanity. So if you want to become more of a male or a female, then connect with both energies. If you want to be more manly, per se, then connect with both energies because it will actually round out and balance your humanity. And so that is a real kind of magical pill that we can take to truly become the fullness that we're trying to become.
Which was really going to that was almost the full answer to the question in my head was what would be the as men we typically want to know what's the benefit of moving into a direction. What is, if I do this intentionally, what am I going to get out of it basically? And so the question that was in my head was what does it benefit men in general to pursue that? But really, since we're talking me and you, I've got to ask the question of you because this is really what we're pulling out of each other each week is what's the benefit for you, Mitch, to go in and push towards intentionally those
Yeah.
energies that you may be uncomfortable with?
A
Can you,
complete human experience, a more complete human experience,
are
quite
you making
frankly.
it? Are you making it? Are you making those intentions?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really is a more complete human experience. It's like, we've shared on the show, the last year for me has been really difficult. The last 3 or 4 months have been incredibly difficult with my mental health, emotional health. On the same token, while I've had some really, really dark moments in my life, I wouldn't exchange those for pleasantries because it's rounding out my human experience.
Mm.
This human experience is emotional. You're going to feel emotions. You're going to go through trauma. You're going to have highs and lows. The question is, would you trade that for a dull experience? Like, would you trade those moments for an experience where you feel nothing? It's almost like they've given you a drug and like when you go to the dentist and they deaden your mouth and you can't talk and you can't feel and you can't drink. Would you rather that be your soul?
Mm.
Or would you rather have a full human experience. And so, this idea in the manhood that men are tough and men are gritty and men aren't like girls and men can do things that women can't and men are this and men are that, that is a soul dying experience because it calluses you, your heart, your mind, your emotions to the depth of this human experience. And what's interesting is, and I've seen this, I grew up in the South on a farm in a small conservative Christian town in Oklahoma. I know what manhood is like. And if you ask some of those people that I grew up with, I'm the opposite of all of that, right? Because and I always have been since I was a kid. But what's interesting is this calloused hands, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I have known so many manly men in my life that get to the end of their life, and guess what they say? That doesn't work. I mean, I've had these conversations with 70, 80, 90-year-old men, and they reflect back and they go, it doesn't work. It disconnects you from a true human experience, thus disconnecting you from the people closest in your lives. It's like, when's the last time you went on a date with your partner? Well, we don't do that. We're men. When's the last time you cooked a meal for your partner? Well, that's, in the manhood world, that's her responsibility. When's the last time you did some dishes? Like the little things that we should be doing together. In the manhood world, you don't do because it's not manly, it's not tough. And so, really, it's like, do you want to live with a soul or do you want to truly experience this life? That is the benefit. And the benefit, the byproduct of that is you'll have deeper relationships with yourself and with others. You'll have more powerful experiences in those relationships, and you'll just flat out have a better story to tell. Out of all of my trauma and all of the things that I deal with in my life, I wouldn't trade them for the world because I've got a great story to tell. And some days do I wish it was different? Sure. But on many days I don't because it helps me connect with people. It makes me more human. Those experiences that I'm feeling and that darkness I'm fighting and those thoughts that I'm having to swim through, it makes me more connected and connectable with other humans going through this experience. And so that is the benefit, quite frankly. And I think people get to the end of this life experience and realize that, which tells us a truth. When someone gets to the end of their life experience and has a revelation, that is a truth that we should listen to. So why wait till the end of our life experience to reveal that truth? Why not actually have it now?
I will stop this conversation with that question. There's no better way to end it. Mitch, great. Thank you so much. Once again, it's always good to see you. Conversations with Mitch Gray and Dr. Keith McNally. For those of you who are watching and listening, we'll see you next time. Take care.